myself.
And so yeah, but you know what? That's something you can share too. I've never heard that story.
Well, and
You
here
know.
we are, Faith on Fridays, 5 p.m. We're live. So welcome everybody. I'm Terry McHugh. If I haven't met you, one of the pastors here, and
That story.
turn it over to Pastor Chip. 5 p.m. We're live.
I'm just sharing the post here.
Okay. I haven't met you, one of the pastors here, and that story. Pastor Chip.
Keep talking, Terry. I'll be there in a moment.
Yeah, so, and if you haven't met Terry Freed, she'll maybe say a word about herself, Pastor Chip's wife, and Wally Everett, who's a retired detective and police officer, and we asked him to come in here tonight to join us as a chance to have a conversation in the current climate. And again, Pastor Chip will kind of pick up on there, but we're glad you're here, and we're glad anybody who's jumping in is here, because it is good to be together.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sure is. We're going to jump in. We're just going to say a couple things, kind of give people a chance to jump in. I want Wally Everett to introduce himself. After I do, we'll do that. Anthony Spencer is also both of these gentlemen are members of Garfield and leaders at Garfield, and have been in career law.
Froze.
Anthony is still on active duty.
Oh no, we froze up.
And Anthony had a call come in.
Tracy?
Let's see. I am trying to mute people and I cannot mute them. Can you try, Terry? There we go. Anthony got an active call, so he had to jump out. So we're gonna have a focus of our conversation with Wally, which is great. Before we do that, just throwing out there to all of you, we talked Sunday about the Shield of Faith. We're talking about our PPE, and that the Shield of Faith is a special weapon for a special time, armor, not weapon, special piece of armor, PPE, and just if you had some times this week, you may have had to raise that shield. We've had to do that a lot, I think, during these days and times. And Pastor Lori, after I preached that message on Sunday, she said, you know, the devil didn't like that very much. So you're going to take some hits this week. And of course, she's always right. But I had just preached on the Shield of Faith. You may not know this, but today also is a Loving Day. It's an important day that my wife and I celebrate. It's not a well-known holiday, but it was the day the anti-miscegenation laws, which were the laws against interracial marriage, were the Supreme Court voted down. And it was in honor of this couple, if you know, Richard and Mildred Loving. If you haven't seen the movie Loving, it's just a great movie. It's really, you know, I study history a lot, and obviously anything related to civil rights and the movement where I did my dissertation. I did a lot of study on the Loving. Sometimes movies embellish. I tell you, I just thought that movie, it almost felt like a documentary when you watched it. And they were really, really true to script. But Richard and Mildred Loving, if you don't know, were arrested because they were married, even though they got married in Washington, D.C., where it was legal in that particular district. It was illegal throughout the United States. And the case ultimately went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court overturned those laws. And lo and behold, do you know, today in America, it's been this way for the past 4 years, since 2016. 1 out of every 5 marriages that happens in the United States is an interracial marriage. Think about that. 20% of marriages that are occurring right now in America are interracial, and it's really because of those pioneers. And my wife and I have been talking with all this current climate and talk about race. You know, we kind of forget we were both of us were born into this country when it was illegal for us to get married. In 1970, it was still illegal. I was 8 years old, so I still remember it was still illegal for us to get married next door in a state of Indiana. We always think of these things as down in the South. And it is true, Alabama actually did not vote their laws, even though the U.S. Supreme Court did. Now, they were bound by the Supreme Court decision, but they never amended their constitution until 2001, and it only passed by 60%. So anyhow, Loving Day is a great day for us. And you talk about somebody that had to put up the shield of faith back then, huh? Richard and Mildred Loving. So Terry and I always pay him homage. And so going into our current state of affairs, I'm going to unmute Wally, or he can unmute himself. And I want to ask some questions. We know right now there's a lot of talk around the police with several, prime incidents of racial injustice. Ahmaud Arbery, the police were not involved with that, but we're involved with Breonna Taylor, and obviously with George Floyd, that has triggered so many of the protests and consciousness raising. And so I want to talk to Wally about that. But Wally, ever introduce yourself? Tell us about your career. Tell us a little bit. Wally's a retired Cleveland homicide detective. My Lord, what stories he must have. And I just love talking with him. But share a little bit about yourself, your journey as a law enforcement officer, Wally. And if there's things in that office there where you are, you got a lot of mementos. Point some of them out to us.
Well, I did 32 years on the Cleveland Police Department. Basic patrol, of course, you start in. And I went from there to the stress unit, which is a unit that takes care of fellow police officers when they have any kind of problems, marital, drugs, alcohol, because they're just a reflection of society. They're not, they're regular human beings just like everybody. Then I became the union vice president, charged with protecting officers and sometimes the kind of officers that laid on George Floyd's neck. Not always happy to do that, but it was part of the job. And then I became a homicide detective, which was most fulfilling because you got a chance to give the family back some kind of closure when you put the person away who killed their family member. So after 32 years, I retired, and now I can talk about them because I'm not there anymore.
Well, can you, hi, everybody. I'm Terry Freed, Chip's wife. I had a question in terms of that. You said now that you're no longer in that field, and that's kind of like behind you, how are you, your everyday life? Do you miss it, being a part of law enforcement? Anything about it you miss? Or are you say, hey, this is retirement and I'm just, I'm glad I was on a police force, but, maybe not. Maybe this is something I really probably wouldn't have chosen for myself.
I miss it. I wanted to be a policeman since I was about 20 years old. And you miss the camaraderie. It's a whole different lifestyle. It becomes your whole life. Just as an aside, when I got on the police department, I was 210 pounds in 1981. And in 8 years, I gained 80 pounds. So I
wow.
pounds a year in my first 8 years. So the donuts and bagels and everything. And I still have all the guys I work with. We talk to each other almost once or twice a week. And you miss seeing them and interacting with them because most people don't experience what we experience. So it's a different world.
Right. That's why I want to jump into that different world a little bit, Wally, and just, getting right to it. The video of George Floyd, saying, I can't breathe, calling for his mother, people on the sidewalks begging that, get your knee off his neck. Can you guys check his pulse? It just, when you as a former police officer, and then I'll ask you further beyond that, but someone who wanted to be a police officer since the age of 20 and a lot of pride in all the work that you've done. When you saw that 8-9 minute video, talk to me about kind of your gut reaction, your emotions, your front of the brain thoughts. Talk to us about that.
Well, in 32 years of police work, I have never seen anything like that. They used to have chokeholds when I came along on the department, they banned them, but
Mm.
it was merely grabbing in here with your hands to put the weight of your whole body, because your thigh is your strongest muscle in your body. To put that on somebody's neck is just unthinkable. And obviously you've got this guy subdued because you've got your hands in your pockets. If you were concerned with him, you would never put your hands in your pockets. You just, I don't know what was wrong with that guy. He just lost it, or he intentionally, well, he obviously intentionally did what he did. And when somebody's calling for their mother, or I can't breathe, and he goes limp, and you still remain on his neck, there's something wrong with that. And it's true in a lot of places in the police departments around the country. And the screening sometimes is different. Personally, I think that over the years, policing has truly changed. And has it changed for the better? I don't think so. When I came on the police department in 1981, many of the guys were former military guys. They came from the Marine Corps, they came from the Army, or some other branch of the military, or they came from the city, because everybody lived in the city back then. And so black guys, white guys, everybody lived in the city, and they were fairly tough, or they knew their way around the neighborhood. Well, today, policemen don't come from the city, they come from suburbia. And so they come with fear. And so when the training doesn't alleviate the fear that they feel, and when they come in contact with other cultures, specifically Black people, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to react to us. I can cite as an example, I have been working downtown in uniform, back when I worked in uniform, directing traffic from some event at the old municipal stadium. And you would see people pull up next to me. Now, I'm in full police uniform, no hat on. I was supposed to have it on, but I didn't. And they would look up at me, white people, and lock their door. Because what they saw was a Black man, or whatever they termed me, and they locked their door. Fear me? I'm the guy who would lay down his life for you.
Right.
I don't have to know you to make that sacrifice. So it is nothing new, but on the police department, it's different because these guys are fearful.
That's really interesting. You said something earlier about, when you were working with officers, whether they were dealing with, drug addiction, alcohol, domestic violence, whatever. And you just said something offhanded that, police officers are human beings. Anything that affects human beings comes in. I mean, I always say that about pastors sometimes. Pastors aren't human. We're very human. And it's striking to me that what you just said about, some officers now come from suburbia or whatever. So, or they're coming in flat out racist. I mean, if somebody is flat out racist, we know racism affects our country, or a white supremacist, that may come into the force. If somebody has an unconscious bias, because they've never really interacted, some of what you were sharing, that's going to come into the force. So I guess, and we've seen some of that, and I'm sure you experienced racism in your career, even probably from other police, but you just expressed from people you're there to protect. I guess, when you're looking at this, and this isn't really new. I mean, we go back to Watts, we go back to, Stuart King. We've got, Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin and Tamir Rice here in Cleveland. I mean, there's been a problem. Just what are some of your perspectives on what you've had to experience that, see it. And you said it kind of was ominous. It's getting worse. What can we do? What can the police department do about this?
That is an answer I don't have. I wish I had that answer. The screening process needs to be better. The psychological exam that they give almost everybody has to be better. The training has to be better and different. You have to take people who are fearful and train them well enough that they know they can handle most situations. Physical situations where somebody's bigger, tougher than you, and there's always going to be somebody tougher than you.
Yeah.
But you have a partner, you have other people coming to help you. But if you're there's less fear if you have the proper training. Most of the time, it's just we teach you how to shoot, we teach you the law, we give you the gun, we give you some handcuffs, and we tell you to go to work. That's not enough in today's society.
Not at all. That's interesting. And if you're just jumping in with us, we're here with Wally Everett, 32-year career law enforcement officer, one of Cleveland's bright lights and really one of Garfield's bright lights. And we're talking about some of the current state of affairs and some of the questions and just getting a perspective from Wally. And look, folks, well, all we're asking is honor Aretha Franklin's RESPCT. Major respect. And we're not asking Wally to speak for every police person in America. We're just getting one kind of bird's eye view from someone that knows. And when you talked about training, so I just finished this week, Wally, I was in 4 days, what's called CQ, Cultural Intelligence. I'm actually was certified so that I can help train people. And it's a study, it's emotional intelligence kind of hit the corporate arena in the 90s. And a guy named David Livermore with a major study out of University of Michigan, major science, started talking about cultural intelligence. And Mosaics is the organization, you know, that I coach in and helping expand the dialogue about race and multi-ethnicity in the church, was just awarded the contract to any faith-based group that want to deal with CQ. We're going to help train. But the interesting thing is the reason they did that is because CQ is so expanding. Like their clients are the U.S. military, Coca-Cola, you know, I mean, they're all over the need. Everybody knows we need to have these kind of cultural awareness, right? Mm-hmm. I asked a question to David Livermore when we were in this training. I said, have you ever done this with a police department? And he went dead quiet. And he said, no one's ever called. Now, I don't want to say that police departments may have their own diversity training. I don't know. Were you aware of anything like that, like cultural awareness, diversity training, really immersed in part of how to become an officer or no?
Well, as I recall, when I came on the job, you got 1 hour of diversity training, and that was it. And then as in the, I want to say in the early 2000s, they sent everybody back to the academy for a 1 day diversity training. Is that enough? Nowhere near.
No.
Yeah.
And the people, as I recall, the people who were teaching the diversity weren't my ethnicity. So,
wow, that doesn't help at all. So you're talking about a lot of different things that I didn't think about.
That was really helpful to me because you think about that pre-2000. Okay, let's do the 1 hour, which we, you know, it's almost like, I hate to say tokenism, but it feels like that.
And that's all it was.
And then after 2000, okay, let's progress and do 1 day. And we see how pervasive this issue is. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like, you know, I say in the ministry sometimes, you know, now a lot of churches are starting to talk about racism. And they're saying like, well, let's go to a seminar, you know, and I'm like, great, go to a seminar about racism and then just go back to segregated pulpits and pews. I mean, it's not, you know, it's like, how do you immerse? You know, it's like, I love what we do at Garfield, and, you know, Kimberly Chapman Wynn does such a great job leading multi-ethnic conversations. Spend 8 weeks walking in people's moccasins, right? And spending some serious conversation. And that doesn't fix anything, but that's just even an entree. And here we are, you know, we had 700 folks go through that in 8 weeks. And you're telling me the best that you know of was the police department did 1 day.
1 whole day.
Yeah, so I think there's something in that that's so significant.
It makes me think that if that was back during the time when you were in training, makes me wonder what is being taught now in training,
Yeah,
as far as diversity training?
that I wouldn't know, but I would hope that they've done better. But when I came on the police department in 1981, racism was a given. I worked in the 3rd District, which was downtown Cleveland, from 55th Street down to, where do we end? West Ninth, the river. And the Black guys were not allowed to work the downtown cars. This was 1981. They only were allowed to work with what we call the ghetto cars, uptown. And I found that difficult to understand because I came from Detroit and I came to this little hick town, Cleveland, and I'm wondering, what do you mean I can't work downtown? I can go where anybody else can go. And as another aside, I became active in the union. And back then, when you'd walk into the bar at the union, the club, because I was known to have one or two, and you'd walk in there and the first joke you heard was an N-word joke.
Wow.
So I had a lot of fights. Fortunately, I could fight back then. Thank God I don't have to fight.
The older we get, the better we used to be.
Oh my goodness. But yeah, and just to be in a place where there are policemen and they're throwing the N-word out like it's nothing.
Yeah.
That was a whole culture shock for me.
Yeah.
And hopefully I changed that by becoming active in the union and fighting and giving them something to see that they couldn't use that kind of language and they needed to change the way they saw us.
And even
Wow.
rising into leadership in the union, I think that's a pretty amazing story. I'm sure there were some hurdles you had to jump over there.
Well, yeah, because I was the first and only vice president of the union, Black.
Wow.
That's amazing. I got a question to you about the union, and then we got a couple great questions from Kimberly and Barb. If you're just jumping in with us on Faith on Fridays, we're here with Wally Everett, 32-year career in law enforcement in Cleveland, bright shining light. Ended his career as a Cleveland homicide detective. I can't even imagine. Was the first person of color to be vice president of the union in Cleveland Police. He's a leader at Garfield Memorial Church. He's a brother. He's a friend. We had another officer was scheduled to be here, but he's on active duty and had another call come in. But we're not asking Wally to be the spokesperson for every police person in America. We just thought it'd be good to get some perspective. So we've been talking about that. And if you want to jump a question in, please do. Kimberly and Barb did. I'm going to get to them real quick. I do want to say, though, the union, okay, the police union, for those of us lay people on the outside, we hear about the blue wall. We hear about, the attorney for the police officer, Derek Chauvin, who had his knee on George Floyd's neck, is the same attorney that represented the officer who shot Fernando Castillo in Minnesota. So there's this, and suspicion is so high. There's such a lack of trust right now. And I think Kimberly gets to that in her question. But there's this image that the union, the blue wall or whatever, is not holding officers like that accountable. Like it's just the fraternity, that the good part of the fraternity is wonderful. And I know that playing college basketball, being at a college frat, I've heard that from military, the police, others, that part of the camaraderie and the fellowship is great. But the suspicion outside is there's a lack of accountability when officers go down this road. Obviously throwing the N-word around so regularly like you shared is horrible. You were helping to hold some people accountable. What about this image of the union, that the union is actually not helpful for protecting African-American men, let me say it that way, from policemen that are capable of doing these kind of acts? How would you react to that?
Well, the union is in a different position. They are responsible for taking care of the police officers. The police officers pay into the union so that exist. So it is not up to the union necessarily to have oversight over what the police officer does out on the street. His union's job is to protect the police officer. Now, there have been some that have gone too far and the union stepped away, because if you acting outside the scope of the job, then the union can step away. Most of the times they won't, because you'll have rank and file members at a meeting saying, you got to protect that person. So what do? You have to give your best effort to protect people who are paying for you to be there.
Dues.
Yeah, they're paying union dues, and they expect to be represented by the best. So you hire the best attorneys, and many times that looks bad when they walk out of court and they aren't convicted of anything. But the reality is they've got great attorneys. The union is there for them, and they do what they need to do. Now, the administration of the city, or not necessarily Cleveland, but any city, needs to have regulations to control what the police officers do. We banned the chokehold. There should never be a time when you put a knee on somebody's neck.
Right.
You've got enough officers there to control anybody. 4 officers can control 1 man. I don't care how strong he is. I don't care if he's drugged out, which this guy wasn't, but you've got enough officers to control this guy.
And
So,
he's down on his face with his handcuffs behind his back. He's
Not resisting
It's
necessarily.
totally necessary. I've seen situations where a guy was cuffed and a police officer was overly aggressive. This is back when I worked the streets, and a police officer was being overly aggressive, and I would take the cuffs off of him. Because if you want to fight him, then go ahead. I mean, that may have been wrong on my part, but I'm not gonna get a federal case because you want to beat somebody up who's handcuffed.
Right.
Because you're in control once he's cuffed, pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the rules that are set by the city. There are guidelines that every city should have for police officers to do the right thing. And the training, again, back to the training.
Back to training.
And
Well, I had a question. So what
Let me-
about
let
me,
me
the
add a-
citizen? What about me, the citizen that, I mean, I know from what I understand that's, a police officers pay and they have pension, but, we pay for police officers. I mean, I'm a citizen. Where does that leave me? I mean, if I'm a paying citizen, my taxes and so forth, where does that leave me?
I'm not quite understanding.
Well, I guess I'm just trying to say, as they say we as citizens pay for police salaries. So where does that leave me as a citizen?
We're supposed to protect the community.
Yes, serve and protect. Yes.
We're serve and protect. And that's what we're supposed to do. And that's what I expect every police officer to do. That's what I expected with everybody I worked with. And that's what I expected from myself. They're talking about a consent decree that they have now in Cleveland, but they had a consent decree when I got on the police department it started in the 70s. And that consent decree was to get more minorities on the job. They did that. They had a minority recruitment unit. They had all kinds of things in place to get more minorities on the job, because some Black folks don't want to be police.
Right.
And because we have a sour taste from being involved with the police. And in that respect, you need somebody going out to try to see in other places in the community, trying to recruit Black people or other minorities, females, Asians, everybody needs to be represented on the police department. And that's not happening. If you have a better representation, then you're automatically gonna get better service in totality. Now you're gonna get some bad apples, Black, white, green, anybody. But the more you have represented of that culture, the better off I think we would all be.
100%. That applies to just about everything, any organization we talk about in the church, corporate arenas, education, et cetera. Who's on the bus, who's making the calls, who's leading the crew. Let me read you Kimberly's question here, Wally. I think it's a great one. And Barb has one that we'll just get some perspective on. Kimberly talks about bringing back community policing. She feels that would help. She says, I walk in my neighborhood, which is a predominantly middle-class area. Police drive by, they rarely wave, they don't stop to say hi. Needless to say, none of them live here. They should at least be trained with how to respect the residents. She mentioned a mall that she stopped going to because she was tired how the police tended to look at her and her girls. So what is it about feeling part of the community policing, and just being generally trained that a little bit what you just said, we're here to serve and protect and build those relationships, kind of as bridge builders in the community. What would you say to that?
Well, community policing, when Cleveland had community policing, worked wonderfully because they had many stations in each neighborhood that were manned by a couple of police officers, and they got out every day, they walked the neighborhoods, or the people in the neighborhoods came to the mini station to visit them, to bring them lunch or whatever. But they got to know the people in the community, and that way they helped curtail some of the minor crimes that went on. That if there were abandoned cars, they would get them towed, and just little things that make it better in each and every community. And by getting to know your community police officers, you feel more relatable. You feel like they're more relatable to you. And they need to go back to community policing because we all need to feel safe unless we're the bad guys.
So what do you think they stopped that? Do you know why they stopped doing that?
Manpower.
What's that? Explain.
Manpower. They didn't. They wanted. That was when they were talking about how long it took run times, how long it took for the police to respond to a call. And so when you have limited manpower and the news media is complaining about our response time, then you have to take that manpower that's community policing, pull it back, put it in a car so you can get to places faster. And a lot of crime neighborhoods, when they had community policing, the cops in those mini stations knew who was doing it and could tell the police or the detectives who to go to or where to go.
Right.
So Barb is asking a question online, Wally, and it says about the whole defund the police. I was trying to stay away from that because I don't even really understand it myself to ask an intelligent question. But I think, a lot of people are confused. What does that mean? She's sharing her understanding. It's not about eliminating the police, but clarifying role, the social service rather than stopping crime, et cetera. So when you hear this whole defund the police, just from your perspective, your experience, what are you hearing?
I hear them taking the power away from the police and placing the community in jeopardy. I don't think we should ever talk about defunding the police. Police are a necessary evil, if you want to call us that. We need to be there or there will be chaos where we go. They were talking about countywide policing and those kinds of things. You only create more problems in the city if you go countywide. Because then instead of the city of Cleveland is 53% minorities, well, if you go countywide, then that percentage changes. So you don't need as many Black police officers in the city because the county says they're whatever the percentage is in the county. So defunding the police would only bring more problems, I think.
Okay. So I want to bring this a little personal with Terry and I talked to you about this before we went live. The whole issue of racial profiling, okay? For example, one person said, feels uncomfortable at the mall. We talked about police can come in that maybe are white supremacists we don't know about. They're not fleshed out with this training on cultural awareness or unconscious bias. But we get the sense of profiling. I mean, just in our personal lives, in a kind of a, I don't know, a way that's not as dramatic as the story about my son. But, you know, when my mom died, she had a couple vehicles and we inherited one of her BMWs, and I was driving a truck. I feel more comfortable in that. So my wife began to drive my mom's BMW. Well, between Beechwood and Pepper Pike, she was pulled over 4 times in like the first month to make sure, you know, she actually owned the car. Now that's on one level of it. And I talked to you about my son as a student athlete down in Southern Ohio. He and 2 of his African-American teammates after practice. Now, again, they were just right after practice. They got, you know, sweats on, hoodies. You know, they go to the Walmart to cash their work study checks where all the students did. A 911 call came in, 3 colored boys, and I listened to the 911 call, so I know what was said. 3 colored boys are breaking into cars at Walmart on their way back to the university. You know, 8 cars, 10 officers, 10 guns drawn down on them. Perry got out of the car, his hands up, his cell phone fell out of his lap. He didn't reach for it, thank God. I asked the policeman when I saw that, what if my son had done what most 18-year-olds do, reaching for their phone? Would I be bringing his body back for burial? Their answer was, we don't know. They interrogate him for 3 hours, used a lot of various things on him. Then what really bugged me, they put a drug dog through my truck that Perry was driving. And I was like, the call wasn't even related to drugs. But go there. And I did make the contention, I don't believe if these were 3 white kids in Abercrombie Fitch gear, that a drug dog would have went through the car. So the issue of racial profiling is the first thing I want to talk to you about. How do you react to that? What are your thoughts? I'm sure you've heard about it, seen it. So tell 2 parents who were really shaken up by that in 2010. And I think other parents who live in that kind of fear. So take that one first, and then I have a follow-up question.
Well, that was a long question, too.
I know. Well, racial profiling. I mean,
I've been profiled. I think every Black person who drives a car or walks down the street has been profiled at one time or another. I have 2 nephews who I raised. One's now a plastic surgeon and one's a IT engineer. They were profiled down in the flats by a fellow Cleveland police officer. And I always told them, always cooperate with the police. Don't give them an argument, don't say anything. And because you're fearful of what might happen. And again, this stems from the lack of training, the lack of being involved with people of the city. You got people coming from suburbia, now they're the police, not enough training, they're in fear the minute they see a Black person. So and there are cultural differences, as we all know. But when I get stopped by the police, 10 and 2. If it's night, I turn on the interior lights and wait for them to tell me what to do next. And because I know I've been fearful walking up to a car. You never know if you're pulling over a murderer or a robber or who you're pulling over. Not let alone pulling over a Black person because they're already afraid of you just because you're Black. So the best thing, always cooperate. If you drop your phone, let it lay there until they tell you you can pick it up.
and you're wise. Again, these are the conversations my wife had with our boys, and every mom and dad of color have had to have, that people of Terry-and-I's hue have never had to have. That's the privilege piece. But yes, we get that. And that's the wisdom, again, of the African-American community and other communities to know how to survive basically in a racist country. But I guess, again, to eliminate this daggone unconscious bias or intentional bias, it seems like we keep coming back to training, which just is not happening to the extent it needs to happen in that regard. You know, sniffing those guys out early.
Yeah, I don't know, because I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, how we sniff these people out.
Yeah.
And some of them can beat the system. You're always gonna have a few. But I think there's testing that is available that they can eliminate most of them. You're never going to eliminate all of them.
Right. But it makes me wonder, you mentioned fear twice, and it's just, it's interesting, I think, and I can't, of course, it's not all Caucasian people that, okay, they see an African American and their fear, you know, if they see him walking down the street. But for them to understand that African Americans also have fear. And it makes me wonder, a Caucasian or white cop, what, you know, you wouldn't know this, but, you know, what do you think it could be? What is the fear about an African American person? Where is their fear coming from? I don't understand where the fear is. Why are they fearing us? And
Well,
maybe you don't know.
I don't truly know why they fear us. It's been ingrained for so many years. I worked with a guy one day, for probably the only day I ever worked with him. And it was a Memorial Day or something. And so we took our lunch break and went by my relative's house and got a plate of food and ate and left and went back to work. And he said, you know, that's the first time I've ever been around Black people when they weren't fighting.
Oh.
Because he came on the police department coming from the suburbs. So the only Black people he had seen were the ones we encountered when we get called to a crime scene. So, and he said, never been around Black people when they weren't fighting.
So what makes me wonder, and I don't know who could answer, if you could answer this, and maybe you can't either. It sounds like relationship is relational. I mean, getting to know one another, or I don't know if how you would do it in, you know, how they would do in training, have a scenario of this situation. But I don't even know if a scenario would even work unless you had someone that was out of the system that would come in, who was a psychologist or something, to give a scenario where something like that, you know, where, you know, white police officers need be exposed to something like that, like, you know, okay. But I just don't know how that would work to try to take that fear away.
Yeah, I don't know, other than training them to, I mean, if it's karate or something that gives them a better feeling about themselves, that they feel more secure in handling people. And then when I came on the job, most of the guys ahead of me had 10, 20 years. Now these guys are coming on and the rookies are training the rookies. So there's not enough understanding of what's happening in the community for people to, for the cops to relate to. Because a young cop doesn't know enough to train another young cop. He hasn't dealt with anybody but bad people like the guy in my story. So what do you do? Because when I came on, the guys would say, no, man, we can handle this a different way. Well, I've been a Black man all my life. So I knew how to handle Black people, but I had to learn how to handle white people, because the Fleet Avenue area was part of where I worked at. And we'd go to a call, and this is another little example. My partner and I, both Black, and we go to a call. This daughter's having a problem with her mother. Her mother's is inside the house, inside the screen door, and her mother's having issues. And she looks at her daughter and said, not only did you call the police on me, you called the N-word police. She didn't view us as just the police coming. It was so bad, you called the Black police. So and that's an adjustment, because I have a negative reaction when I hear that word. And as a police officer, you have to learn to, okay, I got to take it in stride. It's a whole different world.
No, I like Terry. I'm really struck by the fear and the kind of the fear on both sides, and that it's out of almost like an insecurity that some of this really bad behavior on the part of, you know, police officers comes from. Do you think that there's less? So you just gave an example where white people were, you know, more fearful of African-American police, which is just like, I didn't want to talk about it, but do you feel that if people of color feel more trusting of if the police officers are people of color also, or do you think it's more that the police is just more blue than anything else in that way?
In general, Black people or African American people see the police officer as a police officer until they get to know that police officer. And that's, again, back to community policing. If you got community policing, they get to know the individual.
Right.
You know, that we're real human beings. We have families that we want to go home to.
Right.
And that's something that most people don't get to experience now, because when the police, they come, they handle the problem, they leave.
Right.
There's no engaging them in conversation, whether they're Black or white.
Yeah. And, it seems kind of profound to me. At the beginning, you talked about, being from the city. And so then you're policing in the city, like you're in a community where you actually have lived or are living. And it just makes me think, in general, we really don't have a sense of community. So why would we expect there to be community policing when there's not even a sense of community in communities? And, here where I live in Lakewood, it's an inner ring suburb. We're pretty friendly with our neighbors, but it's only been since COVID that there are some people that have talked to me more. Of course, I'm out 46 hours a day walking my darn dog, but we can't expect there to be community between, police officers and residents, and there's not a sense of community in general. And I'm kind of back to when in multi-ethnic conversations, one of the things that Kimberly and others talk about is you have to live a multi-ethnic life. So until we're all doing that and have friends that don't look like us, don't think like us, it makes it's going to be hard. All these things are interconnected, I guess, is what I'm saying. And, part of a way forward and a way hope is to at least identify some of those things. But, and I'm also struck by the relationships, the camaraderie you talked about, that you still, talk once or twice a week. You said at the beginning to some guys that you worked with. I mean, that's an incredible bond that, gets forged, and it's probably because it's forged in so many difficult situations.
Right.
But so I don't have anything else to say about it. I'm just very struck.
If people want to learn about diversity, all they need to do is come to Garfield.
That's right. Way to bring it around, Wally.
But the funny thing about that, Wally, is that we've talked about this in the Mosaics movement, and I can say it specifically for Garfield. This isn't just diverse people coming together to walk, work, worship together. This is diverse people willing themselves to come together to walk, work, and worship together. And I think that's, so the community piece, the relational piece is all, wonderful rainbows, gummy drops. King was asked about that, individual relationships, and he said, we cannot wait for relationships to form to solve the injustice of apartheid, et cetera. But he said, yes, in the end, we need the relationships. But I think the training that we're talking about is forcing the police to say, we need to will ourselves relationally across cultural lines to get to know people. I mean, we may have blind spots. I mean, frankly, people who become police, people who become pastors, were raised in racist homes. Let's just call it what it is. And so there is a responsibility in the serving, whether it's and where that came out of that aspect in the multi-ethnic conversations, Terry, was from Mosaics, that when we train people that say, well, I want to pastor a multi-ethnic church, we say, well, it's pretty hard to pastor a multi-ethnic church if you don't lead a multi-ethnic life, if you don't have those relationships. But again, they would have to be taught to understand that. And still it comes back to when King said, well, the law can't make people love me, but it can stop them from lynching me. That. So yes, we want those relationships, but something has to happen that we don't put people, and I've seen, pastors, police, obviously politicians, we see that every day, teachers, coaches that abuse the power, the leadership that's been given to them. And if the training is pure, then it's a matter of accountability. And there always needs to be accountability. But if they have missed this piece of training, boy, that sets them up. And I don't know, I've had this feeling too. You know, we talk about the bias, the racism. I've been concerned how many of these young men or women come back from Iraq, come back from Afghanistan, and they've got so much PTSD. And then the first job they go into is, you know, law enforcement. And I'm not sure they've ever been treated for their PTSD. That's more of a probably a contemporary thing. But that's been a concern of mine. You can, you know, talk about that. But another question came up was and I asked you about this a little bit. We didn't go in deep, but somebody asked, did you ever face harassment within the police department? She talks about a friend of hers who was the only police officer of color in a particular precinct who just lived in the community, but he was the only one and faced a lot of harassment, even from other police officers. And there was no one up the chain that could kind of take his place. So now he's actually a pastor. Like, wow, go from one place where you were beat up and go to another place. But I don't know, it's just your own personal journey. You talk a little about that. Did you experience, you know, some of that, and how did you deal with it?
Well, I experienced it in that I had probably one of the guys who trained me was probably one of the most racist guys I've ever known. But he wasn't racist just against Black people. He hated everybody.
Probably.
He was a little Irish guy, and he hated Irish people. He hated Black people. He hated everybody. But I learned a lot from him because he used to be an all-state wrestler. And so people would look at me, I was the big guy, and they'd want to fight the little guy. And he was probably he was tougher than I was. And he would fight at the drop of a hat. But we were out one day, and we were in a place where he was familiar, and I was the only Black guy in the place. And this guy called me the N-word. And so I was going to address him about it. And he said, no, I got this. And he kind of dusted the guy off a little bit. And I was like, you know, it's strange because I know you don't like me. I know you don't like Black people, but you're not going to let him talk about me because it was the blue.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You're messing with a guy in blue.
Right.
So it's weird. And I had a lot of racial issues on the job. I fought a lot. People didn't like me because they said I was arrogant, but I wasn't arrogant. I was confident in myself.
You're red.
Yeah, I'm a red. And but there are a lot of things that happened on the job, and we too much to go into today, that happened that were racist towards me. And I fought through them. I survived. And I'm home with my wife, and she's got the air conditioning too cold, but other than that, I'm fine.
Yeah, we're gonna start wrapping this up. But anybody that wonders why I said Wally's a red, we did a temperament studies where the yellows, the reds, the greens, the blue. That was cult language for Garfield. But Wally is a red. Reds are known to be, you know, take charge people and control people, but they get accused of being arrogant a lot. So that was that inside joke. For those of you out there that aren't part of Garfield. Just circling back to just quick couple things, and Wally, we'll wrap this up in the next 5 to 7 minutes. When I talked about Perry's situation, one of the things I confronted that department on, and this was 2010, was accountability for 911 callers. 3 color boys are breaking into cars at the Walmart. I mean, do we ever circle back to that when we find out this is such a misappropriation? We had the young woman in Central Park recently, you know, taped by a PhD, African-American. You know, get your dog on a leash, that's the law. No, call 911. Here's an African-American man threatening my life. We've seen this at barbecues. We've seen it with Airbnbs. There's something burning within me of, I think, some accountability for, somebody said the police are being used as their like racist valets, you know, like to come their call against people of color. You have any thoughts on that? I mean, maybe I'm crazy, and maybe that's a question for the district attorneys more than the police. But I just wonder for you. I mean, I got to believe you. It's like you get put in harm's way. You get sent into a situation where conflict could emerge and never had to emerge because some 911 caller has got a nefarious agenda or a racist agenda. I don't know. Is there any possibility for having some accountability for them?
There is, but I've only seen maybe a couple of times where the caller was held accountable, and it's a misdemeanor. And police departments would be going crazy if they tried to do that with everybody, because a lot of people will call and say, oh, there's a guy at this house with a gun, because they want the police to get there in a hurry. And it's not true. So do you arrest that person? No. Why waste your time? So there's always going to be that going on. There's going to be very little accountability about it because police departments just don't have that kind of time.
Yeah, and I think the racial sensitivity is a piece for me because I don't know. I mean, we see this so prevalent of white people using their position and privilege to call the police as, you know, a vehicle to express their racism against somebody. But I don't know if we had this training, and obviously I'm still not over the potential loss of my son, but when I get the call, 3 colored boys are breaking into cars, okay, you go pull over that vehicle. But there might be some trigger in the back of my brain that this could potentially be one of those calls against some young African-American men. So let me just, I mean, we got to respect, they could have a weapon, like all that stuff. But I mean, detaining 3 hours and drug dog, it's almost like, okay, we get this, you know? And I guess even in some of these situations, you know, that if officers went to some of these places, just even said, I mean, here's a family coming off an Airbnb that are medical professionals, that are physicians. And I watching tapes on that, treated pretty daggone harshly, that an officer might even go into that situation and go, what, oh, you have your papers, you read this. Don't worry, ma'am, I know what this is. You know what I mean? I don't know if we could ever get to that place of sensitivity and awareness, but not without the training, right?
Yeah, I don't know that we will ever get to that place. I'm hopeful that we will.
Yeah.
But the training is necessary. Being able to screening even the 911 calls. How do you screen that person? Because you don't know if they're telling the truth. So the officer comes, his adrenaline is pumping, and you know, it takes a while for that to come down. So in the interim, he's doing all the things that he knows to do to keep himself safe and to protect the society at large.
Right. Well, I guess I want to wrap this up, Wally. I can't thank you enough. We've been at this an hour. Thank you so much. Kind of being willing to be on the spot to speak about, you know, a brotherhood, a sisterhood that meant a lot to you, good work that you did, but also we started this show off, you know, this podcast or Zoomcast, I guess. How did you feel when you saw the video of George Floyd and everything that came out of you as a police officer, as a man of faith, as a human being? Was nothing short of just disgust and disbelief in some ways. And so I really appreciate you saying that for us. So I just want to end with this. I guess, as you look at our current situation, what's going on, you know, people are finally getting more woke, if you will, to racial injustice, et cetera. But we did, you know, I think that bugs me. We saw, and predominantly white people running up to state houses, semi-automatic weapons, disrespecting the police, no tear gas, you know, no rubber bullets, unarmed people,
Right.
you know, being tear gas right outside, you know, and to try not to be political with the White House or other places. So something is afoul, something's amiss. There's wonderful, wonderful law enforcement officers. There's people that shouldn't be law enforcement officers, just like there are in ministry or anything else. But there's you know, we know that racism, Martin Luther King Jr. said racism is indigenous to America's pine trees. So we know our soil is saturated, but there's something going on that's, again, we've seen these sites It's being exposed. So I guess what's your prayer as a former police officer? What's your prayer? What's your hope that out of all this can, I started my sermon off Sunday with Dr. King's message, out of a mountain of despair, a stone of hope. I guess if you're praying for your little stone of hope, what would it kind of be with everything going on?
Well, my prayer is really for the future of all of us, the young people coming along, because being a little bit political, that guy in the White House is creating a lot of problems for generations to come. And the racism is so blatant now in society, where those little segments, those little fragments of society are taking advantage of what's happening in Washington. But my hope is that things will change. The police will get the proper training. They'll become more culturally diverse, and we can survive as a society, and that every African-American kid that walks out doesn't have to be fearful.
That's good. I'm pulling for my grandkids.
I'm pulling for mine.
We started on this show, you didn't see it, folks, but Wally had his granddaughter. First time he's been able to put his granddaughter on his lap since the whole COVID thing. My son and his wife are, thinking about children in the future. And I'm almost thinking, we started the show off, if you didn't know, today's Loving Day. It's a day Richard and Mildred Loving, an interracial couple, won their case with the Supreme Court that ended laws against interracial marriage. My wife and I were born into that society, but my granddaughter or grandson won't be. And I think we almost got a generation this thing out. But that is going to take, just with the police, we talked about training. I've been encouraging families at Garfield, especially white families. Don't just let my wife or other mothers of color, fathers of color talk to their kids about racism. 10 and 2, put on the dome light, everything you said. White parents, sit down and talk to your children about racism so that you're raising anti-racist disciples of Jesus. We gotta fight this thing back spiritually. And I really appreciate you. I appreciate your hopes. And when you talked about that next generation, I'm with you, bro. I just hope we can pour seeds on. We always say, well, that's the next one. That's the next one. We had a confirmation class this year, 19 young kids, grades 7 to 8 or whatever. The motto of they're very diverse. Everything, Caucasian, African-American, Indian, Filipino, biracial. And they kind of were like, the thing that kept coming up, let's just stop hate. And I was like, let me pour gasoline on that fire. Let that Holy Spirit fire rage. So let's hope for better days. I just want to say again, as a resident of Cleveland, thank you. Hey, I got to put this up before we go. You may not know, but this man is a legend on many levels. Where is my, I hope it's here. Oh, please tell me I found it. Oh man, we can't leave yet. Hold on, stop screen. Hold on. Terry, say something very profound. I'm going to put one thing up.
Well, I will say, I want to add my thanks for your willingness to be on, but also for your, you may be red, but you really exude caring and compassion. Perhaps despite that. No, just kidding. No, but I think you are so gracious, and I really appreciate that. So
here we are. Wally, if you didn't know you were in the presence of somebody famous, here's A&E's first 48 when it came to Cleveland. Ready? There he is. Right there. Detective Wally Everett.
You got jokes today, Chip.
I know. Well, I want him to know you're not just a great police officer, you're a Hollywood star. But, but you're a star for the Lord too, Wally. I know your heart.
I hope so.
For people to come to know God, come to a place like Garfield. I think all churches by the year 2035 are going to be like Garfield. And I don't mean that like everything we do, but they're going to be diverse communities of faith, or they're just going to be irrelevant in America. And maybe living in diverse neighborhoods and being in diverse communities and diverse schools and diverse houses of worship maybe that will train a whole new generation of police too.
And I just like to say relationships too. That's a big thing, and that we promote there at Garfield too. That a lot of people there at Garfield who attend Garfield love to have those relationships, and then in conversation you get a chance to know one another there, and you feel safe, which is one of our core values. So Wally, your wife is wonderful. I love her. But when I got a chance to meet you two, oh my gosh, I see how you guys are together. And it's hilarious, but you're loved so much. Both of you are loved so much. And we're so glad that you're connected here with Garfield. Don't leave us.
Oh, no, I'm not going anywhere. And I'm praying that everybody becomes a Garfield. We want more people to come to Garfield. They can learn how to be diverse and how to love everybody.
Amen.
And that'll change the world.
Amen. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Service. Thanks for doing this today.
Hey, guys. Love you all.
Love you all.
Take care.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.